This year's E3, we got a lot of new games announced, and despite the fact that a lot of them were leaked ahead of time, it didn't really stop the fact that a lot of hype has been built up. So I wanted to talk about the 5 new games announced that I am currently the most excited for. First up is Resident Evil 7. Now, growing up, I was a huge fan of the Resident Evil franchise. It was easily my favorite horror game series out there, and as the years went by, they slowly kind of started to drift away from that and turn into more of just an action series. 5 and 6 in particular weren't necessarily bad games, they just didn't have any of the horror roots that the game series started with. And it looks like with 7, we're finally getting back to that. Along with a definitely creepy trailer, a demo has already been released for the game that Capcom has said they're going to add more mechanics to that. We're going to see actual combat, we're going to see a few more familiar things from past games, but the first-person view is something that's being kept in the final game, along with the dark, gritty, creepy feeling, which I cannot wait for. If done right, this could be one of the best comebacks in gaming history and one that I am definitely welcoming. Second up is We Happy Few. Now, technically this game wasn't announced at this year's E3, it was actually revealed a year ago as part of a Kickstarter project, but this is really the first time that a lot of eyes are on this game, and it was easily the most engaging trailer at Microsoft's press conference. The trailer introduced us to this sort of 60s era style dystopian world where everyone's on drug-induced happiness, and your character is the person who's starting to come down from that and realizing just how dark and twisted the world actually is, which is a premise I absolutely love. And offstage, after the main press events, we did get more in-depth looks of this game, which is this interesting mixture of survival, action, and really basic RPG mechanics with social stealth. You're doing everything you can to escape this island where you're having to find food to survive, taking drugs on occasion, or wearing different clothes to fit in with everyone else, and even having to fight your way through sometimes. Looking at the gameplay, it's not the most polished thing just yet, but it is still in development, and the basic concept alone makes this one of the most interesting new ideas I think that we saw at E3 this year. For number 3 is God of War 4. Now, to be perfectly honest, the God of War series is always a hype train that's kind of missed me. I've enjoyed them, I've had fun playing them, but I never really just jumped onto the full excitement for them before. It always felt like sort of a watered-down branch off of Devil May Cry to me. But the trailer and gameplay we saw for 4 completely changed my mind about this next one. First off, I am all for the movement to Norse mythology. It is one of my favorite historical pantheons, and I cannot wait to see how they breathe to life a lot of the myths and legends from it. And second off, and more importantly, is how severe of a facelift this game's combat went under. You could definitely tell from the older God of War games that they were very heavily influenced by major action-adventure games of their time, like I said earlier, Devil May Cry being a big influence, whereas this one seems to be kind of rebooting the series for more modern games, and is taking much more heavy cues from the Dark Souls series. Where combat in general is much slower paced, it's more methodical, there's still definitely that element of speed and anger at times in it, but overall the pacing compared to the old God of War games is definitely toned down a bunch. This was definitely one of the best executed trailers and demos at this year's E3, and I think it did a great job of bridging a gap between people who loved the old God of War and want to come back for more violence, but also drawing in new people that weren't necessarily into the gameplay style of the older ones. Moving on to number 4, we've got another 4th entry in a game series, and that's Dead Rising 4. Now, I am one of those people who has had complete and total burnout from zombie games. We have had way too many of them released over the last 5 or 6 years, and I just wasn't that big of a fan of them in the first place to really keep on with how many have come out. But the one series that has been an exception for me for this is Dead Rising, because the amount of silliness and ridiculousness that this game has makes it completely worth it. If anything, the zombies are more of a backdrop excuse for just all the silly, stupid shit you can do. And this is one of the things that worried people when Dead Rising 3 was announced, because the initial demo and trailer for that looked oddly serious compared to the rest, and it didn't turn out that way, thankfully, but it did have a few people scared. And I think this is something that Capcom and Microsoft both picked up on and made the trailer for this one completely ridiculous. Focusing on this holiday theme where you're blowing up zombies with rocket-propelled candy canes, we're seeing the return of the main character of the original game, Frank West, who is, by the way, the best main character in the series so far. So it's just shaping up to be this incredibly silly, fun adventure where you just take everything you find, put it together, put some holiday wrapping over it, and run over zombies with it. All things I am for. Well, we had plenty of other games announced and shown off at this year's E3 promising serious tone, dark, gritty worlds. It's great to see that we're still getting a few games here and there that focus on just silly, dumb fun. And that's all I'm looking for when Dead Rising 4 gets released. Now, saving best for last, there's obviously one game that has to be talked about that was announced at this year's E3, and that's the new game coming from Hideo Kojima, Death Stranding. Now, it's kind of a bizarre thing to talk about how much hype is building for this game and how excited people are, because we really know next to nothing about it, aside from a very interesting and engaging trailer that we saw, and the fact that it's coming from Kojima. And normally, that little info on its own shouldn't be enough to get people excited for, because we really know nothing about the game. And yet, that alone is all a lot of people really need. There's a side of me that's very calm and rational, thinking, well, you know, we really don't know that much about this game, we should just kind of hold off, wait till we get more gameplay, don't get excited about it yet, you want to avoid hype, that's never a great idea. But at the same time, there's this fanboy in me that's loved pretty much everything released by Kojima that just expects this to be the next great thing, especially now that he's working with his own team straight up and no longer under Konami. I'm gonna save any kind of crazed speculation about what kind of game this could be for later, but needless to say, this is one of those games that I think a ton of people are just chomping at the bit for more info on, and it's gonna be quite a while before we get that info or any kind of hard release date. So those are the 5 games I was most excited about. There were a whole lot more announced at this year's E3 that are worth talking about, like Injustice 2, Quake, Prey, and more. So let me know down in the comments what games you guys are the most hyped for that we saw at this year's E3. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later.